What's going on, everyone? It's your boy Sinister Cobra and welcome to another Halo video. 343 has released a more detailed article hitting a bunch of feedback pain points and what their plans are regarding launch and post-launch. Keep in mind this list is non-exhaustive and it covers the most common points they discovered while reviewing the feedback given after the flight. As always, I won't be covering the whole article, just the specific points that are being actively worked on. Link to the article will be in the description, however, if you'd like to read it yourself. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So kicking things off is the points about accessibility. So 343 discovered that there is a desire for an auto sprint option and a desire to alter the colors of the damage system color and mark systems. 343 is looking at a post-launch update to address both of these items. Not much information beyond that was given. That is also a common theme you'll be seeing within this article, is that a lot of these things will be addressed in post-launch updates. So next, they talk about audio. So they discovered that players wanted the Needler's audio to sound more crystallized and glassy. So their response to that is that they have worked on the audio for not only the Needler, but the Plasma Pistol and Gravity Hammer. The Plasma Pistol's primary fire is the only one getting changed, as they discovered that players really enjoyed the more classic sound to the charged Plasma Pistol shot. So expect an in-progress version of these new audio sounds to be included within the next flights. Next, they talk about granular controls of each in-game voice, so the personal AI, Spartan chatter, and multiplayer announcers. This will also be addressed in a post-launch update. Moving on, they talk about the Battle Pass and its challenges. So unfortunately, it looks like they're not changing the way that XP will be earned within Halo Infinite at launch. In a previous video, I mentioned that XP will be earned in a per match progression. However, that's not the case, and the only way to earn XP at launch is through challenges. They mentioned that in the previous flight there was a bug that prevented daily challenges from refreshing, and that they were meant to refresh constantly throughout the day, that way you can continuously earn XP. They also stated that the difference between daily and weekly challenges is that daily challenges you'll see things such as play X amount of games, and weekly challenges you'll see a lot more specific things like get X amount of kills with the battle rifle. Next, another feedback point about the Battle Pass and challenges is that the double XP boost timer was counting down while in the menus. This is another item that will be addressed in a post-launch update. Next up, they talk about the bots. So players found that bots were a little too accurate when shooting weapons and throwing grenades. 343 agrees with this point and stated that adjustments will be made at lower difficulties. They want bots at higher difficulties to be a little bit more difficult, so they will be keeping the accuracy of the weapons and throwing of grenades the same. Next point is that bots all want the same way to start, could get confused while moving on the map, and didn't use equipment enough. This had been a known issue prior to the flight, and a solution was already in progress. We can be seeing this solution implemented as early as the next flight. But 343 also states that this is something that can be and will be improving over time. Next and final point about bots is that the Spartan bots weren't much better than ODST bots, and players wanted them to be difficult. 343 says that adjustments will be made to the Spartan bots and that the tuning was off for the flight. There was something in the back end that prevented the Spartan bots from being as difficult as they were meant to be. So hopefully we will be seeing a better difficulty scaling in the next flight. Next, they talk about weapon drills. So there was a desire to teach alt fire modes more clearly. This is something that they will be looking at post-launch. They want to look into better options in order to explain alt fires. Next point about weapon drills is that some wanted a way to swap between weapon drills more easily. This is another item that will be getting updated within a post-launch update. But they are planning to include a training mode, which will be in the next flight. So in the training mode, they will let players experiment with weapons and equipment versus bots, but you'll be able to change your loadouts on the fly via an in-game menu. Next point about weapon drills is that some players wanted untimed weapon drills. This is something that will be included within a post-launch update. And finally, many players wanted equipment and movement drills. Again, another thing that will be addressed within post-launch updates. But they did mention that drills that are in the works, so they are working on drills for grenades, melee weapons, equipment, and vehicles. So next they talk about the combat sensor. Some like the combat sensor, although most found it confusing. This was sort of teased in the last article, but in this one they confirmed that the old motion tracker will be returning in the next flight, and they will be looking at feedback for that in order to finalize a combat sensor / motion tracker for the launch of the game. Next, some wanted height indicators as well. They didn't touch on this point, however, my assumption is that since the old motion tracker is returning, then the height indicators will, as well as previous Halos did have height indicators, and it only makes sense to include that in order to get player feedback. Next, they talk about personal AIs. There was a desire for more customization options, separate voice from body, more shapes, more voices, more colors. So it looks like 343 will be including different models, and they're looking to expand the roster of the personal AI over time. As far as customization for the personal AI, they will be including accessories such as hats, props, etc. Next, players desire to preview a personal AI's voice and personality in the lobby. So the solution for this is already in the works. It should be included within the next flight. Not surprising, as we saw something similar be updated within Season 8 of MCC. Next, there is a desire to increase the variety of lines. 343 has already made adjustments to reduce line frequency, but post-launch they are looking into adding more lines. And finally, there was a desire to control how much the personal AI talks, including turning them off. This is something that they will be looking more into at a post-launch update. They want to give players more control over the frequency of flavor and informational lines. Next, they talk a little bit about the medals. They found that many players were worried about the size, placement, and art style of the medals. So they have gone and revised the medals. They're going to be putting in as much work as possible to include as many as they can within launch, but it sounds like a couple more adjustments will be made and included in a post-launch update. Next, they talk about the friend or foe recognition, aka the friend or foe outlines. They mentioned that this had received a positive reaction from the community, however there were some points that they wanted to cover. So one of those points is the impacted shields and overshield readability. They agreed that it was a little bit hard to tell what kind of health your enemy had. So they're making changes to visual effects that will help determine what your enemy's health is. Next, there was a desire for more options, including the ability to turn them off. This is something that will be highly likely a post-launch update. And from the sounds of things, if we're going to get the ability to turn them off, then we might get the option to bring back red versus blue. Next, there was a desire to have an opponent's gamertag appear above their head. This was supposed to be the case, however there was a bug that caused this to not work in the previous flight. And they mentioned that it may or may not be fixed for the next flight, which is kind of funny. I would think that they would know whether it will be included, but we'll just have to wait and see for the next flights. Next, they talk about aiming. The feedback they got detailed that performance impacted aim, and due to the data that 343 gathered behind the scenes, they're pretty confident that improvements have been made. Some felt the default sensitivity was too low. 343 has increased the default sensitivity, including zoom in sensitivity. There was a desire for axial dead zone controls. 343 has made that option available now. And finally, they note on smart scoping. They said that there are virtually no benefits from using it, only a decrease of field of view, which essentially means that the player is getting a small zoom in when it's in practice. Next, they talk about weapons. Players said that the sniper and skewer were difficult to use. 343 thinks that the performing and aiming updates should help with this situation. Finally, players mentioned that the hammer feels too strong, but also too slow. 343 says that because there was such diverse feedback in this specific case, they made no changes to the hammer, but they will be monitoring it very closely. Next, they talk about movement. Players wanted to feel smoother movement and less warping. 343 said that they updated their network code, however, improvements will be continuously made over time. Next, they talked about equipment. 343 found that players had a lot more positive to say about equipment than negative. The only real piece of equipment that had some feedback was the drop wall. Players felt that it was too slow and too weak. But 343's response is that the drop wall's purpose is to be used proactively and not reactively. And because of this, they made a buff to the deployment speed, but not the health. They don't want the drop wall to be a deciding factor in one-on-one battles. And finally, 343 talks about the HUD. Some players felt the weapon cradle was too small. This is something that will be continuously improved over post-launch updates in order to help make everything on the HUD more legible. Players said that there was an inability to see second grenade types. Again, something that will be included within a post-launch update. Some would like HUD customizations. Obviously, this one's going to be a post-launch update. However, 343 mentions that the team is very interested in exploring options for HUD customizations. Players wanted scrolling and customization. The current layout that we saw in the flight is the layout that we're going to see in launch. But with each season, the layout will be evolving. 343 mentioned that players used the Halo 5 customization as an example of things they wanted to see. However, I would really disagree with that. I absolutely hated the customization layout for Halo 5. I think they can do something better, but hopefully we do not see the return of the Halo 5 customization menus. And finally, players mentioned that customization items were too difficult to equip. 343 says that there were bugs impacting the ability to equip items, and that these bugs should be fixed by the next flight. But there you have it. That is 343's response to the most common feedback points they received for the last flight. It's exciting to see that all of this and more will be addressed in future versions of the game. It's great to see 343 being so open about feedback. To my knowledge, this isn't really something commonly seen with other games, and hopefully they continue this conversation, as I'm sure they will be flighting future seasons as they flighted with MCC. A lot of these changes will be reflected in the next flight, so hopefully that comes sooner rather than later. But that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, remember to leave a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers before Halo Infinite launches, and as soon as I hit 1,000 subscribers, I will be doing a giveaway for a copy of Halo Infinite. Thank you for watching the video, and I will talk to you in the next one.